So I'm Louise Pilote, and it's an honor for me to, on behalf of my co-investigators, to share with you the methodological issues that we faced when integrating gender and sex in our research. So Going Forward is a multidisciplinary team, and our aim was to integrate sex and gender dimensions in applied health research to evaluate their impact on clinical cost-sensitive outcome and patient-reported outcome related to quality of life in non-communicable diseases. And also, to assess whether the impact of each of those factors differed depending on the country. So the issue we had was when it came to analyze data, and the challenge was transferability. And some of the solutions that we explored was the use of synthetic data, federated analysis, and then we will see their utility. So when we first started, we realized that ideally we would be able to have pool data. On the right-hand side, you can see data would be transferable. We would have all the cohorts would actually come to Montreal, and we would merge all the data together, and we would analyze the data together. But we found ourselves in the situation on the left-hand side where we could not transfer data. And it was quite important because in order to assess the impact of gendered factors on outcome and see whether they differed according to the country, we needed to be able to merge the data and then look at interactions of those factors between country and the factor. So what we explored was solutions, and the solutions are called either federated analysis, where the data is actually centrally performed through computer science setup, I'll explain to you, or the use of synthetic data, where the data is actually taken from the source and then we transform it into synthesized data, and then we can actually pool. So what's synthetic data? Data is synthesized from the source data by using sequential classification and regression trees, sort of a machine learning method where you actually synthesize new variables, and then you go back to figure out whether it actually worked and actually whether the data is safe, and you cannot retrace the initial variables and the initial participant. So once you go to this process, you go from the source data and you have a whole new data set that's synthetic data. So we tested that actually, and we had a study where we used the Canadian Health Survey, and then we had the source data, and then we created the synthetic data. And you can see here that the estimates for sex and the estimate for the gender index, I won't go into that so much, but it's a set of gender-related variables where we calculated an index to see their relationship with cardiovascular health. In fact, the estimates between the source data and the synthetic data were quite similar, and then the confidence interval also were quite overlapping. And then the confidentiality was actually, index was really good. So that was the first paper that we did, where we compared synthetic to source data so that we could actually safely transfer that to another country in order for it to be analyzed. So then the other way that we wanted to merge the data was to the federated analysis. This is a bit more complicated because we had to have the servers, and the researchers have their computer in their own site, but then it has to go through a secured server in order to perform the analyses from the various sources of data from various countries in a federated way in a cloud, and then the data goes back to the investigator. So we had to set this up, and this is the study diagram where here we compare the synthetic data to the federated analysis. So first we had to harmonize the variables, make sure they measure the same thing, create the synthetic data, send it to another country, do the multivariate analysis, and at the same time do the federated analysis to see if we get the similar results. So, okay, this is, okay. So the utility of that is that on the left-hand side, you see the result between federated and synthetic, very similar. But on the right-hand side, that's where we actually are able to assess the interaction and see whether there are factors that differ between countries. So in fact, we did have some country interaction, and the impact of sex the impact of education and the impact of immigrant status differed between Canada and Austria, which were the countries that we had used. And just to say that, in terms of, kind of practicality of that, using the synthetic data is actually quite quick. And once you have the synthetic data, you can merge the data together and do the analysis. The federated analysis is a little bit more complex because it requires the use of servers, which fortunately in Vienna, we had our collaborators who was able to set this up. And in Montreal, we had to rent a server and all that. So in a way, it's a little bit more challenging. So this is our challenge and solution. Thank you.